So welcome back to EduTogether at Home. This is Aryeh Eisenberg, EduTogether's founder and CEO, and I am privileged to be speaking this morning with Mrs. Pesha Fischer. Mrs. Fischer is the Senior Educator and Coordinator of Experiential Education at Midreshet Amit, which is a gap year program for post-high school girls, which is located in Jerusalem, Israel. And we've been talking with a lot of schools and tech specialists and heads of schools about how educational institutions are dealing with these learning circumstances during Corona times. And one of the populations that we must include is the idea of gap year learning, which is something that thousands of our students across the world are participating in every year here in Israel and in other locations around the world. And these students have been affected by the Corona closures, as well as those students in the middle schools and high schools that we've been talking about so far. So Pesha, I want to welcome you to our conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So could you do us, for those people who are not familiar with what a gap year experience in Israel is, could you explain just in general what Midreshet Amit is and what is so unique about this program?
Sure. Okay, so Midreshet Amit is part of the Amit Reshet, the Amit network, and the seminary itself is located inside a Beit Hayeled, which is a foster home / orphanage. Means that the girls volunteer on a usually 2 to 3 day a week basis with a child that has been assigned to them. They call it their kid. And they do homework and play basketball, but that's in addition to a full day of learning from 8 until 5, and then again after dinner.
Wow.
So it's a full day. In addition to the learning, it has all of the usual gap year elements of trips and speakers, getting to experience Shabbatonim in Israel, meeting different people.
Wow, that's certainly a full program. Why would students choose to come on a post-high school gap year program rather than just going straight to college? What's the reason that most students take that extra year?
So I think that students, it's going to sound funny as we're talking about education, but they need a break where they can just learn for the sake of learning rather than learning for tests and grades. And it's their opportunity to really learn what they want to learn rather than what's been handed to them as their schedule in high school or what they're going to be majoring in college.
Mm-hmm. So this is really a chance for them to explore some of their own personal interests, a chance for them to develop as students and to kind of hone their skills for the future. That's really incredible. About how many girls do you host every year in the program?
So we usually have between 60 and 65 every year.
Wow, that's quite a large program. Good, that's amazing to hear. So, just like the middle schools and high schools that we've been talking to, I'm sure that the Corona situation has affected your school, your seminary as well. Can you tell us a little bit, just in general, what happened when you first heard about Corona in Israel? What the first kind of stage was to having to transition or to change what you guys normally do?
Right. So when we first heard about this, I think we're like now it was the beginning of March when things, I like to say, really started to go down. And at first we were, the girls were carrying Purell around with them, and it was like, oh, this is going to proceed as normal. We'll just wash our hands a lot, and we'll give out individual Purell bottles to everyone. And it soon became very apparent that the students were going to leave. They were going to go back to their families in America, England, Australia, South Africa. Yeah. And I think that part of that was its proximity to Pesach, meaning most of the students were going to be going home for Pesach anyways. And so this was, around Purim time. We had a full house for Purim. And, everything proceeded as usual. And my boss actually mentioned to me, she said, I think we need to transition to some online learning, like really soon. Really soon. which is when I called you for my Saturday night tutorial.
For our viewers, just so everybody knows, one of the things EduTogether is very privileged and happy to be able to do is to help other local educators and really people around the world to know how to use the online teaching tools like Zoom and Padlet and all the other great tools that we use. So Pesha and I spent some good quality time together, making sure that she was ready to transition to this new form of learning. So.
Correct. And it wasn't just me, because then I turned and passed on what you had taught me to the rest of the staff and coordinated, even though I'm not an IT person. Yes, I'm not an IT person, but suddenly there I was, the beginning of Corona, coordinating everyone's schedules and teaching people how to use Zoom really quickly. And we started right away.
That's really incredible. I'm glad what I taught you worked, or else it would have been a really disaster, right? But that's really fantastic. Did all the students, you mentioned that students were realizing that they would need to go back home to wherever they were from. Was there a mass exodus on one day, or were they slowly trickling? Were there ever times where you were running classes live, but also remotely to kind of
Yes, at the beginning,
everybody?
It started off as a slow trickle until people got blocks of flights. And so at the beginning, we were running Zoom classes simultaneously as we were running, our regular classes, which is challenging because you have people in 2 different time zones.
Well, you said even more than that. If you have people in Australia.
Correct. Well, they were the last to leave. So it was really just America. But then again, it was West Coast, East Coast. That part has definitely been a challenge for us. And so what we ended up doing was recording all of our classes and sending out questions for the students to answer after they had watched the class, if they were not able to, be there in real time.
So you were really using a lot of different tools at your disposal. It wasn't just Zoom. It was probably, what were some of the other tools that you guys utilized? You mentioned question sheets. Did you use anything like an LMS like Google Classroom, or did you use other Google tools? Like, how did you make this all come together in so many different locations?
So I would say definitely Google Sheets is my friend for coordinating everyone's classes and making sure that the students had easy access to which Zoom was for each of their classes. We immediately started WhatsApp groups for each class so that the teacher would be able to send out the Zoom link in addition to the students getting the Google Sheet every week. WhatsApp links also, Zoom links went out in the WhatsApp groups as well.
So a lot of different channels being used to make sure that everybody's able to stay together. That's
absolutely.
That's important. I'm curious, one of the things that is so important to a gap year program is that relationship between the students and their faculty, their teachers. How have you been able to continue those relationships even though the students might not be physically with you?
So one of the things that I discovered about teaching online and on Zoom, I'd actually taught like this last year. One of my kids was sick for 4 days and I didn't want to miss any of my classes.
Wow.
So I taught them all on Google Hangout.
Little did you know.
I know, right? That was my beta. That was my beta run for this. But I literally taught every single one of my classes, didn't miss a single class. This time it was a little bit different because they were all in different places as opposed to me being in a different place and they all, were sitting in the Beit Midrash. It was actually amazing because there you were, at least for me as the teacher, and all the little squares on my screen. And I was still able to treat the world like it was a classroom, right? If I saw 2 students laughing together in the middle of class, I would say to them, girls, I know you're texting to each other in the middle of class. I would call them out by name. They would start laughing like, how do you know that? I said, I'm here. I'm here in the classroom. Just because I'm not physically with you doesn't mean that I'm not following what's happening. We had some great times. One of the, I like to call educational specialties at Amit is a program called Migamot. And Migamot meets once a week, usually Wednesday afternoons,
Now,
2:30 to
Pesha, can I
4:30.
interrupt you for a second? For those people who
Yeah.
are not familiar with what Megamot are, could you just
Yes, I'm
describe?
going to explain.
Okay,
Absolutely. So
sure.
Migamot literally means concentration. In classic Israeli schools, it's your major. We kind of took that in a little bit of a turn. There are 4 Migamot that were in Amit this year: Israel, women, Torah, and leadership. And the goal of the
Wow.
program, and you'll see why this was hard with Corona, is that we had in-class, like informal learning time on those topics, tiulim, that trips that were specific for that topic, and speakers. So one of the things that happens once we lost our physical location is that trips were not going to happen,
Right.
which was hard. But I will say we tried something really amazing and fun that the girls said was actually their highlight in my leadership megama. One week I had 3 speakers come in for 10 to 15 minute slots. They spoke for
Interesting.
10 minutes. The girls were able to ask them questions. And then a new speaker would come into the classroom. And it was amazing. As the girls said, we would not have been able to do this in real life because
True.
who can schlep out to your school for 15 minutes?
That's a great point.
No one.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things that really does stand out as an advantage about online learning. I know a lot of the work we've done with schools, when schools have come to us for a class in 3D design or computer science or architecture, they need that teacher at 2:00 in the afternoon for 45 minutes on alternate Tuesdays or something something crazy. And you're right. We can bring people into an online classroom a lot easier and a lot more simply than we can if we have to bring people to our locations.
For sure. And people from, let's say, all over Israel, because my speakers were located in their physical homes. One lives in Yad Binyamin, one lives in Alon Shvut, and one lives in Modi'in. And they were all able to teach in my classroom on the same day.
That's
so
amazing.
It
That's
was
incredible.
amazing. It was really amazing.
Did you have any, I'm just curious, being that this is a gap year program where students are really there to learn because they want to learn and develop their skills, did you see any significant fall off, or did you have any challenges in the commitment that the students had once they were on their own? Even though they're on their own when they're in Israel, they still have you guys there, the staff, to kind of motivate them. But at home, they really are more by themselves.
Absolutely.
Were there any challenges in that respect?
Yes, absolutely. Also difficult with the time zones, meaning even if you wanted to get to the class, if you live in Australia, then then you're getting, the 9 a.m. class, which is New York 9 a.m., Israel 4 p.m. for the teachers. So you're in Australia, you're going to get that class, but you're not going to be able to show up at your afternoon classes, even if you're motivated, because it's the middle of the night.
It's the middle of the night, yeah.
It's the middle of the night. I think that the West Coast, like the LA students, had a difficult time showing up to those 9 o'clock classes because they were at 6 o'clock in the morning for them. So I would say that was, a definite challenge. And I would say a good number of them then went over and listened to the recordings. We continued sending out the recordings for every single class.
Wow, that's great.
So that they could be there. The other funny thing that we noticed is that students that in our actual location had a difficulty in getting up and getting out in the morning to come down to classes, those students all came to class on Zoom.
Interesting.
Because how far did you actually need to get to? You needed to roll from your bed to your desk, which was in your room. So
literally
that
a foot,
was,
right?
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. But it became more of almost like an adult education program, in that if you want to come, you're coming. And if it doesn't work you that day, then you're not coming.
Got it. You mentioned before the training that you were able to provide to your colleagues. what did you do to make sure, obviously with any type of technology, some people pick it up quicker than others. And, you know, one of the challenges for teachers all over the world over the past few months has been this instant transition from classroom-based teaching to all of a sudden having to teach with Zoom and other tools online. You know, did you guys continue to do support and professional development for the teachers as this process unfolded?
Absolutely. We actually just had a Zoom meeting last week because now we're done with our teaching, right? The gap year is over, and we had a reflection meeting where we talked about our challenges. We talked about what we thought was great. We talked about what we want to bring back into our physical classrooms when we get back there. It was actually amusing for me because I have started to use virtual backgrounds in my classes, and I use them as almost a motivation. Like there'll be a random picture in the background, and the students, as the class goes on, will have to figure out what the virtual background has to do with what I'm teaching. And I joked around and I said, I kind of want to have that virtual background always. I want to be able to snap my fingers, you know, change my background and be like, oh, hey, what does this have to do with the Gemara that we're learning right now? So
that's great.
Yeah.
Something you can't do in the classroom so easily,
something
right?
Well, the truth is, I feel like maybe I'm going to. I think there's going to be a lot of props that will now come into my classes. But I also, it's going to sound funny, but even when I was not teaching, those first couple of weeks of Zoom, I was definitely on, as I would get frantic calls from some teachers, remind me how to do this again. How do I share my screen? I don't remember how to show a video. So I was available even when I wasn't officially, you know, teaching my classes.
Did you expect to be the IT and technology person in addition to everything else that you did this year? You know, everybody has stepped into these amazing new roles. You know, I've joked with other people in your position. You better be careful. You know, you can find yourself doing this full time next year. You know, just be the tech person. But
I never thought. And when I say never, I really mean never thought that I would be doing IT and setting up meetings. We did a virtual Beit Midrash, which was like really fun. We set up a whole bunch of days of learning, like Yun for the end. We had a preparatory college seminar where we had, you know, people from all over the world coming to speak to the students about it. I never thought I would be doing this.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like you really stepped up to the challenge and you really made it something special, something unique, you know, so the students did it, even though the students had to be unfortunately sent home, they were still able to have that amazing gap year experience. And that's an amazing thing that you were able to do for them.
It was amazing. During one class, we actually had a dance party.
That's a new one.
We had a dance party and we were playing music that had to do with leadership, and after I presented a number of songs, each student then shared a song that was like their song that got them going, and there we were, you know, in our virtual classroom partying. It was amazing.
So teacher, administrator, tech person, and now DJ. You know,
definitely.
The list just keeps growing. That's fantastic. That's you know, but all joking aside, so you know, I keep hearing stories like this, and it's so nice to hear because, you know, obviously nobody saw this coming. Nobody thought in September that we'd be doing everything online. But look at the amazing, unique things you've been able to figure out and that you've been able to add to your program that probably would not have been done had you still been in
absolutely. I think that one of the amazing things about being a teacher is constantly challenging yourself. And I think that teachers often end up in an educational rut where you're teaching the same classes and you get into your routine. And I personally, I don't want to be bored of myself. So this was great because it was a challenge. It was a challenge to, how do you teach in a totally different way? I usually move around a classroom. So how do you get yourself to move around a classroom when you're sitting on a chair?
Well, it sounds like you figured it out.
I figured it
So
out.
good job. I joke, this is the story I always tell. I had one of my first years teaching online. I was teaching a group of middle school students, I think in New Jersey, if I remember correctly. And I had a student in the class who was a very quiet student, and I kind of sensed it, and I made a point of calling on him, and he gave me a great answer to my question. And I said something to the principal afterwards, and I said, so-and-so gave me this amazing answer to the question. He said, really? He never says anything. He always hides behind the bookshelf when I teach him. So I said, well, in online teaching, there's no hiding behind the bookshelf. Everybody gets that front
Right.
row seat, and everybody's a star. So it sounds like you guys really embodied that, and then that's fantastic, and should be very proud of those efforts. It's really incredible. What does next year, with September coming, obviously we all hope that things go back to normal, but I think a gap year program, whether in Israel or anywhere else, has to look at things a little bit differently because you're not dealing with one location. Obviously, being in Israel, yes, whether Amit can open or not is determined by Israel, but whether people can come from all these other different places is determined by a lot of different groups. What are have you guys thought about what next year might look like for you guys? And really also, what do you think that the corona effect will have on this idea of gap year study in general? Do you think it's something that will continue in this different format? Do you think that it'll have to be adjusted further? Where do you see it going?
So I'll tell you something interesting. There's a lot of articles out now about how more students are planning on taking gap years next year
Really?
than ever before, because if they're going to be online in their colleges, they would rather be having an experience than be home and be in college, sitting at their screen. So
That's interesting.
that's not, particular to Israel. That's around the world. So that's going to be an interesting development to watch. We're kind of preparing for all eventualities, which means that, yes, we are preparing to open our doors in September and have, a location with classroom teaching. And we're also preparing to have everything online as well, because, waves of corona that come back in the winter, who knows? None of us really know what's going to happen. Right. I joked around based on my own experience that if a teacher is sick, obviously the teacher should not be teaching even online because they need to recover. But if, your child has pink eye and can't go to school, there's no reason that you can't show up to your classes.
Right.
So that's going to change the experience. I would say that, we're preparing to be able to teach anywhere, anytime, which is going to be,
incredible, fantastic,
fun. And who knows where developments will go. The world is moving quickly.
that is very true. Can't argue there. Any advice that you would give to other gap year administrators as they're looking towards the next cycle towards September?
I would say that people just have to have multiple plans. You'll appreciate this, but towards the beginning of the year, I brought in the book Option B by Sheryl Sandberg to the students. And I actually got 2 copies, and they were passed around. The students read them, passed them around, commented, schmoozed with each other about them. And I spoke to a student last week, and I said, don't you think it's interesting that you guys all read Option B, and that's what your year turns into, right? You turned into this.
Who knew?
Who knew? Do you think that it was helpful for you to prepare for, not just my ideal option A way of teaching, but also, all possibilities? And she said, it was helpful in all walks of life. It wasn't just I'm in seminary in my bedroom, but my whole family is home. And I didn't think I was going to be home for this year. So I think it's a way of thinking where obviously we're preparing for what we think is our ideal, but we have options B, C, D, E, F, G, etc.
It sounds like you guys are ready to make things work no matter what happens, and I
Yeah.
think that's a great outlook. As we always say, hopefully things will get back to normal quickly, but we never really know. Like you said, we don't really know what the future is going to be, but it's so amazing to hear how successful Midreshet Amit has been in making sure that programs have not only continued, but have really thrived, to make sure that the students get that a gap year program. So really fantastic, and we're so happy that it was even with the challenges that you guys had such a positive conclusion to your year. I want to thank Mrs. Pesha Fischer, the Senior Educator and Coordinator of Experiential Education at Midreshet Amit for Girls in Jerusalem, Israel. Pesha, thank you so much for being with us today, and we really wish you the best of luck, and we hope that you're all back where you are supposed to be in September. But if that doesn't happen, we know that your students will still be very lucky to get such an amazing experience. So thank you so much for talking with us today. Take care.